God bless the cipher, the rotation. God bless the beatboxer's lungs, amen for breath control, the smiles that pry open faces when flow goes unbroken, and the smoke. To stories you can see, to coming in on the one. Some ideas, they shake you out of your sleep like when a toddler creeps. Totality of the deep, the mere thought of an unconscious manifestation carried out with the beat. Positive charged protons creating neural explosions. Time hiccups when fingers and pads touch. Dead air smiles because it knows what's coming. The countenance of the clock claps hands. The choreography of the knot slaps jams. And you be like, who made this? Vertebrae responding to the call so bad to make a B-girl curve the wall. Picture this. Underneath the margins, your words can breathe. Got your listeners tilting isosceles the way you holding volcanic quills, spitting decrees. Better believe it flows like these. You got gills, screaming at daffodils or dreaming in mandrills, derivative of skills. You're built in the workshop, rocking with Ra. Cause in life, the woodshed don't stop. It don't stop. It don't stop. Don't stop.
What's going on, world? It's yours truly, Mazi Mutafa, here for another edition of the Alternative Winter Break Media Arts Edition. This one's a little special to me. This brother I've got on by the name of Dr. Jason Nichols. Some of y'all know him as Jesus. Some of y'all just know him as Jason. I know this guy all the way back to College Park, when we would sit in African American Studies classes and argue over the readings that I literally never did, and he always did. So it made it very easy for him to defeat me in those rhetorical jousts. But over the years, we've had some shared readings, some shared experiences, and I'm super happy to have him here as our guest. Let me go and welcome this brother in. What's going on, Dr. Nichols?
What's going on, brother? It's good to see you. You know, I feel like it's been so long because of COVID that I haven't been able to share time with you and your lovely wife, and you know, our families get together. But you know, hopefully that will be behind us soon. We'll all be vaccinated, and we'll be able to spend some time together. You're not getting vaccinated? Come on. All right, that's another conversation.
I am getting vaccinated. My wife has already gotten the first injection, but we will see you sooner rather than later, God willing. Regardless, I know that that you and your lovely family have been thriving during this time to the degree that you can. I've been witnessing you on social media, dealing with haters. I really feel like there's some sort of a hashtag like Hate Dr. Nichols where all of them find you. I'd be like, yo, why do you even talk to these people? But I feel like I trained you for that at the University of Maryland, dealing with irrational arguments without losing your cool. So you're welcome.
Thank you. I appreciate all the help.
No doubt. So I want to begin this conversation, and I begin them all the same way. And to be honest, it's selfish. I know tons of people, but don't really know them, like know their history, their family. Like the fact that I've known you for probably 25 years now, and I'm going to learn things about you in this conversation on the internet that I haven't learned in person. So let's begin with the question I kick off all the interviews with, which is, how far back does your own knowledge of your family go? How deep is your knowledge of your family tree?
So, you know, and obviously, like many people, like everybody, I have elements to my family, but I would say I can at least trace one part of my family all the way back before the American Revolution. As you know, free Africans, you know, free in quotations in Northern Virginia. There's a gravesite around Loudoun County, Virginia, that has some of my ancestors there, and that, you know, those go back before the Revolution and before the Constitution and all of that. And you know, I think my roots run really deep. It's really, you know, kind of an honor and a blessing to have that kind of knowledge. If you go to the National Museum of African American History and Culture, there's an exhibit there where it has a man's freedom papers. from Loudoun County, Virginia. And that man is my 6 times great uncle. And he had a little tin box that he kept his freedom papers in. And they have not only the papers, but the tin box also on display, because, I think about the anxiety he must have had going out every day with those freedom papers in that box. You couldn't get them wet. You couldn't lose them. You had to be careful who you showed them to or who you handed them over to. And he had to be very concerned every time he left his home to bring his freedom papers, because you could, as everybody saw, 12 Years a Slave and other situations where, there was always somebody who was eager to make a buck off of a black body. So I can trace my family there back very far. But I can also, trace my paternal family. That's my paternal grandmother's family. My paternal grandfather's family is from the Caribbean. So originally, we can trace them to Barbados, a small island in the southern part of the Caribbean. And in Barbados, they lived, and I know that my great grandmother in Barbados, her family were big landowners. And in part because her father, I believe, was a white man. And when you had, whites owned the land there, British, Scottish people owned the land, but he allowed for his daughters to inherit that land. And apparently they fought over the land. She did, and one of her sisters. I may be getting this story wrong. It may have been her mother. I'm not even sure. But and this is all broken down in this actual story written by a famous Harlem Renaissance writer by the name of Eric Walren, who is a distant cousin of mine. He was my grandfather's first cousin. And he's one of the forgotten people from the Harlem Renaissance, but he was very famous. He was as famous as, all the others, Langston Hughes and others at the time. And he was raised in Panama. And a lot of people from Barbados and other Caribbean islands, Jamaica, they went over in the early part of the 20th century to Panama to build a canal. My family was very similar. Also went to Panama to work the canal. And many stayed in Panama. Many Caribbean people stayed in Panama. My family decided to come to the United States from Central America. So I like to say that my family's always been international in that way. I know that they spent some time, my great-grandfather and great-grandmother spent some time in Trinidad as missionaries, and then Panama as laborers, and then came to New York City. My mother's family I know very little about. Her father, honestly, I really found out about him from Google searching and finding out, when he died. And the only reason I was able to find anything is because of his military service. He served in World War II as a sailor. My mother's mother, I know bits and pieces about. She was born in South Carolina, as was my mother's father, and came to New York City with her siblings when she was very young, got very little education, but was somebody who was always very creative and very ambitious. And so when she got to New York City, she always had a hustle, a way to provide for herself and her 3 children that she essentially raised alone. And so she had a very big impact on me, as did my other grandmother, who's still alive, who's 92, who through this COVID situation, not only have I not gotten an opportunity to see Mazi, I've not gotten an opportunity to see my 92-year-old grandmother, which has been, difficult, trying to keep her safe. But one of the things I keep finding out things about my family, I found out, during the whole situation with the Electoral College, that my grandmother casted an electoral ballot, was the first Black woman in the state of Rhode Island to cast an electoral ballot. And that was, very significant. We have all these, nobody's famous in my family, but we have people who have done significant things. So, I mean, that's kind of my family history going into my, my parents. Obviously, my grandfather, my father grew up pretty middle class. My grandfather was a professor. He started out as a professor at Hampton University, where he met my grandmother. He was a professor. She was a student. Kind of scandalous. Wasn't scandalous at the time. Would be scandalous today. But he was her professor. They got along really well. They ended up getting married and having children and being married for, 60 years or so before or 50, I guess, years or so before my grandfather passed. And he was a professor. And one of the interesting things about him was that he was teaching at Hampton, and, he taught at Morgan State, and he realized he wasn't going to get the kind of jobs that he wanted. And he experienced so much racism here in the United States that he took his family, packed everybody up, and moved to Europe, moved to Germany. So you got to think there was a Black family living in post-World War II Germany. I always think that that's really, really interesting. It also gives me kind of that, international perspective, is that, my grandparents and my dad was raised in Germany. He's, to this day, he and one of his brothers is fluent in German. And, he stayed in Germany, my grandfather, until he got the kind of job offer that he thought he deserved. And so he taught at Brown University in Providence, Rhode Island. So my dad's background is a lot more middle class, a lot more educated. His parents were educated. His aunts and uncles were educated for the most part. And so he came from more of a middle class Black background. Being middle class Black was different than being middle class white, but it was still, he came from that kind of a solid background in terms of, class, not skipping any meals, education, being readily available, going to good schools, learning, living in I guess relatively integrated environments, certainly overseas where, there was no formal segregation, but there weren't also a lot of Black people. And he actually tells some very interesting stories coming over from Germany to the United States in the middle of the Black Power movement as a Black man who was raised in Germany, coming to New York City. And, one day I'm going to do a movie about his experience, basically being a Black guy, but really being almost German in terms of the way he was, the way he thought. And the world was a lot more separated then. Being European was very different than being American. It's not so different now that we have all these things that connect us. But my mother's background was very different. My mother's background was very impoverished. She grew up, basically a single mother. Of course, she knew her father. He was kind of in and out, but she knew him and sometimes spent time growing up with his sisters in Brooklyn, but was raised between Brooklyn and Harlem. And she, she and my aunt and my uncle lived kind of a rough and tumble upbringing in public housing in New York City without a whole lot. Education was secondary to survival. And my mother ended up joining the military, as did one of my uncles. So my mother was military for a short period of time. And she was also working, she was in the reserves, and she also worked in a hospital. And that's where she met my dad, who was a physician. And they met in New York City at Sinai Hospital. And my mother had already, she was already a single mother at the time. So that was a little bit of a controversy within my dad's family. But, and then that's where you get the beauty that you see before you. But that's pretty much my family story. That's who my parents are. My mother went later and, got an associate's degree in Philadelphia, where we moved later on. Pretty much immediately after I was born, my family moved to Philadelphia. And then after growing up in Philadelphia for about 6 years, my family moved to Maryland, and that's where I've been ever since.
So let's talk about the first recollection you have. So as you know, this is a media arts set of conversations. So this idea of talking to creatives who work in media in particular. So can you tell me about your earliest recollection of doing anything creative?
Yeah, I mean that's a my best early recollection of doing anything creative is probably dance. B-boying or breaking or however you want to call it. During the period in the early 80s when you had it on Coke commercials and actually even before then, I can say one of the beautiful things about having a connection to New York and to, Manhattan and Harlem. And, I'm very conscious, just in case you don't recognize, I'm very conscious about the way I say Harlem, because Mozzie makes fun of the way that I say it. So I'm very conscious of pronouncing the R in Harlem. But yeah, so I think it was, b-boying, and, I some of my early memories actually were seeing people breaking down cardboard, you know what I mean? And the people on my block in the park and in the center and all of that, like, doing the things that some of my friends who grew up in Maryland and friends who grew up in other places, that they only see in movies. I actually saw some of that. I actually saw people bombing walls and all of that. I'm not saying I understood it, and I had the historical background, that I knew where it started and this and that. I actually saw guys in my neighborhood, who were friends with my sister wearing Zulu beads. I knew about Zulu beads. I didn't know what Zulu Nation was about, what it stood for, but, being able to learn those things later and see it up front and make the connection and connect the dots is something that I feel really blessed about in terms of my experience growing up. But I was always interested in the dance because that's what got the crowds around. You know what I mean? The community that I'm from in New York City is primarily Latino, is speaking, or it was, it's not anymore. Was primarily a Puerto Rican, a working class Puerto Rican neighborhood. It wasn't the South Bronx. It wasn't the poorest neighborhood or anything like that. It was a working class, Puerto Rican neighborhood. So you had, people who worked working class jobs, stacking boxes or, fixing cars or whatever it was. And it was a vibrant community. And
do you remember how old you were when you saw this? Do you remember like roughly how old you were?
I had to be about, early memories had to be 4 or 5.
Okay.
You know, I mean, when I tried it and started, I was probably 6. You know, and the thing is, when you're a little kid, you have ability and strength, actually, you know, body weight strength. So b-boying actually comes pretty naturally. You know, that's what I think is cool whenever I watch like b-boying and breaking with little kids. And people are always impressed by what little kids do. But a lot of times in the back of my mind, I'm like, it's easier for him. You know what I mean? He's got incredible flexibility that he won't have in 10 years unless he keeps this up every day. So, you know, I honestly think I was pretty decent. I was a decent b-boy at the time, you know, because I could do a split and I could, you know, put my legs behind my head and I could spin on my head. And I remember my mom making me stop dancing publicly and getting involved in those kind of b-boy ciphers because I actually brought it back to my suburban neighborhood. And because there was a rumor that, this is kind of funny, and maybe Mozzie, you'll remember this, but there was a rumor that Alfonso Ribeiro, who later became Carlton in The Fresh Prince, had broken his neck by spinning on his head. Do you remember that, Mozzie? I don't know. But that was the rumor. And so, you know, that was one of my special moves, was the spinning on my head. And, you know, my mother had forbidden me from doing that. But that was something, coming up with new moves. I can remember actually coming up with new things. Of course, first you emulate what you see, but then, you know, you start to put your own little spin on it, even when you're young. And, you know, I probably think if I had had like a dance mentor, like if I had lived in New York, I didn't. I lived in Maryland once I got a little older. If I had had that that mentor, you know, like an older dance mentor, I probably would have kept up with it. But that was the first time I started seeing my own creativity. Like, you know, when I was watching dudes battling and seeing exactly like what they were doing, I was like, how can I do that, but put my own little spin on it? So that's where I think my creativity first started coming out.
That's what's up. P.S. Our good friend Black Picasso responded, I remember that, to the Carlton Alfonso Rivera rumor. So this is interesting. So your mother forbids you. How does that stay in effect, or and you move on to something else, or do you just stop doing it in public in ways that she would find out about it?
I think the other thing is, and we all know the history of b-boying, I think a lot of it was that b-boying kind of went out of style. Like it, you know, I wasn't as devoted to the art form you know, I was like, this is cool, this is hot, this is what gets, you know, my sister's friends excited. You know, they come over, they're, you know, I'm 8 and they're 15 or 14 or whatever, you know, and they're like, oh, he's so cute, you know. And so I was liking to dance for the attention. And then when b-boying, you know, got so commercial that it was in, you know, Coke ads and, you know, all of that. And then the streets kind of moved on from it. I think the rest of us, particularly kids who were raised in the suburbs, we follow what the streets do. And at a certain point in the mid to late 80s, you know, with the advent of gangster rap and things like that, you know, and even to a certain extent, New Jack Swing. I mean, I still danced. I did the New Jack Swing dances, but, you know, I think I just kind of moved on and stopped doing it after that.
So if you were 8 years old, that means you were in like the 3rd grade. Are there other creative memories you have from elementary school, or does creativity kind of take a later stage? By creativity, I mean like anything. It could be writing, it could be, I guess I froze. It could be writing, it could be music. What's the next creative thing that you pick up?
I think the next creative thing was music and rapping. I'd always been in love with it. I still remember, you know, first I remember, so one of my earliest memories, I guess this isn't necessarily creativity, but one of my earliest memories from Philadelphia when I was like, just above speaking age was The Message. The Message used to play in Philadelphia all the time. And knowing that those lines, don't push me because I'm close to the edge. I'm trying not to lose my head. It was like, it's like a jungle sometimes. And I could repeat that when I was, I don't know, 4, like I could repeat those words because it played so often. And I was, so I think rap music had always kind of had a part of my heart. And then I remember my sister had the 12-inch, the Run DMC 12-inch. And I remember the King of Rock was my favorite. Or was that Rockbox? Sorry, Rockbox. But just that first couple of bars where, DMC is saying, I'm the king of rock. There is none higher. Sucker MCs should call me sire. To burn my kingdom, you must use fire. I won't stop rocking till I retire. And I just remember like just those drums, and we, like a lot of families at the time, we had the big like stereo with the big speakers. And when we would put that record on, and of course, we listened to Prince and, Michael Jackson and all of that, but something about that record and that particular song, I just loved it, and, Run, I thought Run was dope too, but there was something about DMC's voice at the beginning of that song that really kind of grabbed me. So I think I started, again, I don't know how creative it is, but knowing other people's rhymes at the time, so I guess I'm the original biter, what I'm saying? But knowing other people's rhymes and the rhymes that stuck in my head. And I remember the first mixtape that my sister brought back from New York, because my sister used to live in New York. And so she would come back and bring me tapes, cassette tapes, and this is like early, you know what I mean? Like, I don't even know if they were mixed. I don't know how it was, but she would bring a tape. And I still remember, I think this was, I want to say it was Schoolie D, where he had this rhyme where he was like, went to the store, brought me a 40. Got kind of high and kind of drunk, so I had to beat up this little punk. and I don't know, whatever that rhyme was, like I used to love that rhyme. You know what I mean? If anybody knows that song, let me know. I still don't know the title of that song, but it was on the tape. There was no track listing. It was just a blank tape, that my sister used to bring back. And I didn't even know what a 40 was at the time. And just the getting that, and then getting into like, we were in elementary school and somebody would have an NWA tape and we would just pass it around. Getting into the music, I didn't know how I was necessarily going to contribute at that point, but I was like, just loving other people's creativity. So I wouldn't say creativity necessarily took a break, but I think it was just building up inside me where it was like, you know what? I have my own experiences. You know what I mean? I have my own stories that I want to share. I have my own thoughts. And, what the song that made me want to rap, where I was like, yo, I'm going to write my first rhyme. I still remember was a song called My Philosophy from KRS-One. I knew I couldn't authentically, being from where I'm from and all that, I couldn't authentically say, some of the gangster stuff that I heard Ice Cube say, or, the stuff I heard other rappers say. But, I was really into Black history, and like I said, my dad came to this country and was essentially learning how to be Black, learning how to be Black American. You know what I mean? So he was kind of learning a lot, and so he had every Black Power book you could think of. And I used to, flip through those and read those, and that's actually what got me to, I think, my profession in terms of teaching. But I used to read those books, and I heard my philosophy, and that's something about that sample that I think very deeply. You know what I mean? It was like, yo, I think deeply. You know what I mean? I can do this. And that's when I started kind of writing my own rhymes.
How old were you when you wrote your first rhyme? Do you remember?
Probably 12, maybe. Probably 12 or 13.
So you're in 8th grade. So you're in middle school or your freshman year in high school?
I think it was earlier than that. Maybe it was 6th grade or something like that. Maybe I was 11. I think I was probably 11 or maybe even 10. But I think I was old enough that I would want to write something.
Gotcha.
But a little younger. I was definitely younger than high school.
And so you decide, at this point, do you decide I'm going to really dedicate myself to writing? You've got books of rhymes, or you're signing up for school talent shows? How does this show up in terms of moving from writing your first rhyme to kind of committing yourself to it?
I started writing my rhymes, but kind of like Nas said, where he was like, I was too scared to, grab the mics in the parks and kick my little raps because I thought people wouldn't understand. I was afraid to actually, share my rhymes with anybody. It was just something I kind of did in private. I didn't have a rhyme book at the time. I was writing on, in my class notebooks, you would find, my history notes, and then all of a sudden you find a rhyme. And I think it was when I got to high school that I was like, there was a guy that I knew who had the confidence. Shout out to him. Shout out to Ricky Garcia. And Ricky was another suburban kid with roots in New York. And one thing Ricky had was confidence. I'll be honest with you, Ricky, I love you, but I never thought your rhymes were that great. But you had the confidence that puts you above the rest of us. You were willing to grab the mic. You were willing to get in the middle of the circle and spit the rhyme. You know what I'm saying? And Ricky, I started sharing some of my rhymes with Ricky and some of my other friends. And I still remember when I got their respect, when I spit a rhyme, because at first they were like, oh, boo. And I remember when I spit a rhyme where it was like, yeah, I got the best rhyme here. None of y'all can mess with this. You know what I mean? And it also, took me to a point where it motivated me to want to spit a rhyme that was just crazy. You know what I'm saying? And that was kind of what motivated me to have rhyme books full of rhymes and, all of that. And then when I was in high school, there was a dude, I had moved, and there was this kid in the neighborhood, white kid, actually a black kid and a white kid. Black kid wanted to rap. The white kid had his, had like a really basic sampler, and he would, chop up other people's hip hop beats, you know what I mean? And we would record music over it and record our own songs. And so that's when I started getting to the basics of song structure in terms of like writing a chorus, you know what I mean? I didn't necessarily know how to count bars or anything like that. So one rhyme might be, 18 bars, and then another rhyme might be like, 8 bars. And, so I didn't really have the structure down, but I did understand a chorus, and, I started writing that. and getting into writing a song, a complete song, rather than just a rhyme to spit around my friends and hear a bunch of oohs and ahs. So, that's where I kind of, my creativity even grew more.
I'm curious because of your background and especially your father and your mother's commitment to academics. What's happening for you in school at this time? Like, are there teachers that are encouraging you to write or to like what? Who are the people in your life? P.S. You are literally the first person I've ever interviewed whose older sister put them on to particular songs. Everyone is their older brother, so you get the prize of the dope older sister.
Yeah. Dope for other reasons. No, I'm kidding. Shout out to her. But she definitely, she put me on to a lot of music in the early part, and that's the thing is, I think we can't undervalue the role of women in hip hop and the role of women in the culture, just as consumers too, and fans, and tastemakers. A lot of, I think what Tupac said the big, about rap for what women want, because they really are in a lot of ways the people who shape the sound of the music in a lot of cases. But she definitely put me on. I think, I had a teacher. I only had, this could get really deep, so I'm going to try and keep this answer kind of short. But I don't think I got a whole lot of encouragement in a whole lot of ways from teachers, and this is why I try to tell young people who have certain sensitivities. You don't have to be Black or Latino or anything like that. You can totally be white or Asian or whatever your background. But I tell people the importance of teachers and coaches and encouraging your students and encouraging, the athletes that you coach or whatever, even if they're not the best athlete or the best student, or, you're always going to have that special student. But sometimes it's the other person. You know what I mean? Sometimes it's the kid who's cutting up in class. That kid probably needs you more. And I don't think I got a whole lot of encouragement. I think I got a lot of discouragement. And, as somebody who didn't have a lot of confidence, I think the discouragement, I think, hurt me in a lot of ways that I got traditionally in academia. And hip hop saved me because it gave me that confidence, and that's one of the things I think is so important about hip hop, particularly for Black men, is with all the indignities that we suffer on a day-to-day, in hip hop, for a moment, you literally get to be what you want to be. You know what I mean? You can be, when you're called every name in the book, and I always talk about this in a lot of different contexts, but when you get on the wheels of steel or you get on the mic, you're Grandmaster so-and-so. You know what I mean? You're, you may not be doctor or somebody Esquire or anything, but guess what? When you pick up the mic, you know what I mean? You get to be whatever you called yourself. You get to be MC. That's a title that's respected in our community. And I think that's really powerful, and that really helped me in terms of confidence altogether. Was my alter ego, gave me refuge from all of the degradation that I think I received in other parts of life and in other parts, as a young Black kid who wasn't being encouraged in a lot of ways. But the one teacher that did encourage me, her name, Miss Corcoran, the one teacher that did encourage me, she was incredible. And she loved poetry. And she got me into, reading Walt Whitman and a lot of other poets and Black poets and white poets, and that I can't say that it directly affected my rhymes or anything like that, but it definitely opened my mind to new ideas and new things. And I thought that was so incredible. And the thing was, culturally, we were so different. She was a blonde-haired drum major from Wheeling, West Virginia. So that's what I mean when it doesn't have to be somebody who looks like you, even though I think that's important. It's more about who believes in you. Because I had Black teachers that discouraged me. It was this one woman saying, I see something special in you. And to date, that still means something to me.
What was Miss Corcoran your English teacher?
Yes.
And so, do you remember what grade that was?
So I had Miss Corcoran in 8th grade, and then I had her husband, Mr. Corcoran, who was pretty good himself, in 11th grade.
Dope. So at this point, do you take on the pen name of Jesus, or do you have is there an initial MC name that I'm unaware of?
So there is an initial MC name. Jesus was always kind of a nickname, going back to 6th grade. But everybody has the whack rap name, right? So don't laugh at me. But I think my original rap name was Kid Icarus. So that was my original rap name. No reason, you know what I mean? It was just something I picked out of thin air. And then, later on, I was like, I might as well call myself what other people are calling me. And so that's when Jesus came along.
I'm curious, Jay, was because of your father's education and the history of education in your family, was college always something that you saw in your future?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, for me, for my dad's family, it was never if you're going to college. It was when and it was where, excuse me. So that was always something that I saw in my future, definitely. I never considered anything, else really. I think my dad at one point, and where I went to school too, that was kind of, I went to a private school. So that was kind of like the expectation. Nobody dropped out. Nobody went to the military, unless they were going to go to the Naval Academy or to West Point or the VMI or the Citadel or something like that. And I really didn't see that in my future. So college was pretty much a given and a definite for me.
I wonder how you feel like being triple degree, getting your bachelor's, your master's, and your doctorate, like how that college experience, while at the same time being a recording artist who's making music, who is performing around the area, but also moving units in Japan, like how it is that you kind of married those two worlds of being an artist and a scholar.
I did. But I also will say that, at one point I thought I was going to blow up as a rapper. And so continuing with my education past college was kind of like plan 1A. Plan 1 was I was going to be, a famous rapper, and then I was going to expand into different things. And plan 1A was what, I always thought about things, and I still think about things this way, is what distinguishes me from other people. You know what I mean? I don't have necessarily that good from the hood story, or that come up story. What about my story is unique? And I think, education became part of, the uniqueness of my story. I was a college graduate, then I had a master's degree, and then, By the time I had a doctorate, I kind of knew I wasn't going to be a famous rapper. But, the fact that I was pursuing one at one point, that really was something that I thought made me unique. And I thought was going to help me in my rap career was, here is somebody who has specialized knowledge that other rappers don't have. So when he's rapping about this, he's bringing in different ideas that come from his educational background.
It's interesting because I've had the opportunity to sit in on some of your classes, and I definitely see the role that being an MC has played in your development as an educator. Like, your students are enthralled with your lectures, hanging on every word, and transformed by the experience. Like, you've won multiple awards where you've been nominated by students, and so it's clear that that time on the stages has paid off in your professional life. I wonder, and then we think about today, kind of the work that you're doing in media. It's for a much larger audience. Usually, where someone is attacking your ideas or asking you to defend someone else's, which oftentimes aren't your ideas they're asking you to defend. They're asking just to defend a position. I wonder how you feel like, that experience of sometimes battling, of sometimes performing, has shaped the way it is that you've developed your kind of public persona as Dr. Nichols on various media outlets.
Thing I'll say is a lot of the practice that I got on stages, or some of the stages, I have to thank none other than Mazi Mutafa, who, as president of the BSU at the University of Maryland, booked me for some shows and paid me, so that was something that I think gave me a lot of experience. And I have to thank, my brother for always, or often looking out and giving me those opportunities and giving me opportunities to open for, big name artists. So he was definitely a part of that development and part of, giving me that experience. I think the big thing is that, what rapping on a stage has given me is that it's rare that I freeze in front of a crowd. I like an audience. You know what I mean? I wish I could see all of, whoever's watching. I only see Black Picasso's comments popping up on the screen every now and again. I think I saw Omar. But I wish I could see everybody who was watching. It gets me excited. Of course I have nerves. There's no question about it. And I'm somebody who, quite honestly, has sometimes, battled with, some self-esteem issues and not thinking I'm good enough. And I think it was hip hop that, got me excited to go in and face those fears and want to be in front of a crowd, want the microphone. You know what I mean? Whether it's in front of a classroom or, as Mazi has seen, and he's had me on panels before, and sometimes he has to give me that look like, yo, don't answer every question. You know what I mean? Don't take up everybody's time. But definitely, those opportunities to have my perspective heard are things that I revel in and things that I enjoy. And so those are, where I think those two worlds have kind of married each other, is the opportunity to actually give my perspective and to actually speak to people. And in a classroom setting, the cool part is they speak back. I don't just hear a cheer, I hear feedback. I hear people like, well, what about this or what about that? And in other media, it's the same thing. This is, to me, it's like the old MC battles when I used to go down to Erico's on U Street. I was not the best battle MC. My Mozzie even clowns me because my freestyle is very ABC. You know, the cat jumped over the moon and Jesus is in the room and I'll put you in the tomb. You know, that kind of, you know, it's not, don't look for the, you know, the super complex, you know, supercalifragilisticexpialidocious freestyle for me. But, you know, still being able to think quickly on your feet, you know what I mean? And being able to answer and retort when somebody is attacking, not necessarily you personally, but your position. And I think, again, all of that, the hip hop experiences that I had gave me a little bit of training for those situations where I'm not quite easily rattled. And so, you know, you can have somebody who I've seen rattle, you know, I've seen Tucker Carlson rattle really smart people, you know, because he's just prepared with some sort of logical fallacy. And I'm not easily rattled. You know, I'm not easily taken out of my zone. If you're battling and you take what somebody said personally and you get mad, then it looks like it's true. You know, and then you're not thinking clearly. So to me, you know, somebody comes up with a dope line about me. Oh, your shape up is crooked. Your blah blah blah. You know, I just have to stand there, you know, and kind of be ready when it's my turn. You know, I'm not going to get all rattled and angry about it.
So, speaking of your current work as a pundit, I know the other thing that you've been doing really for the last few years is blogging. So I know you were contributing to a blog. It was called Diverse Patriots, and I know now you're a part of a new blog. Can you talk a little bit about the writing that you're doing, and even if there's some book work that you also have in the process?
Actually, my last column just ended. I was writing for a publication called Roca News, but I think they're moving in a different direction. They're trying to do more of like a barstool sports kind of thing. So my you know, political writing has kind of ended for them. I still do political writing every now and again. I've written for a lot of different people, from Al Jazeera to FoxNews.com to NBCNews.com, a couple of different outlets. I think most recently and most often write for a website that's actually known as being a right-wing website, but they always want kind of the counterpoint. They're trying to do point counterpoint now. And so I write for a website called The Daily Caller occasionally, and going to be doing some more work with them in terms of podcasting and other things. So, you know, I've kind of gotten used to kind of getting behind enemy lines. Roca News isn't necessarily that way. They're kind of neutral, but a lot of the work that I've done with others has been, I can't even say that. It's been on both sides of the aisle. And, you know, I enjoy writing. You know, I enjoy having my perspective out there. You know, one of the things that I'm doing really recently in terms of creativity is I've been writing a television show too. So, you know, I just enjoy, you know, as you probably can see, I always have like a million thoughts in my head. You know what I mean? There's a bunch of things swimming in my head. And when I get an opportunity to get it out, you know, I enjoy that. And when I get to actually share it with people, you know, it really is something that's cathartic for me, like just the way writing a rhyme was. You know, writing a rhyme, to me, there's certain people that just love like the rhyme structure. And I love that. And two, There's some people that, just love doing something creative, with rhymes. I love that too. There are certain people that, just love the props they get from writing a dope rhyme. I love that too. But there are a lot of people, I think, when it comes to hip hop and we're writing rhymes, it's about the catharsis of it, the letting everything out. And I can do that with a rhyme, or I can do that with a script, or I can do that with a blog. Whatever's on my mind. It just so happens with the blogs, it's usually political or social. It might be, with writing a film or a TV show. It might be, a different thing. It might be a love story. It might be a whole lot of different things, but there's something in my mind and on my heart that I want to get out. And this gives me the opportunity to do it. And so in that ways, to me, it's no different than writing a rhyme. You know what I mean? And you're going to get props from it in some cases, so there's that element. If you write it well, if it's well written, people will enjoy that, and you'll be able to look back on it and be like, damn, it's like, any MCs on here, you probably have picked up one of your old rhyme books and you flip to one rhyme and you're like, damn, that was dope. You know what I mean? I never recorded that. And that, with the blog, it's the same thing. Or listen to one of your old songs and being like, yo, that was a dope song. And so it gives me an opportunity to really get whatever's on my chest out to the public.
Dope. I got one last question for you, but there's a question and a half. Because we didn't actually talk about how you got into commentating, like how you got on television and the radio and podcasting. Like, how'd you build those relationships? But that's not my question. My question is advice that you would give to your younger self. Like, now having been down this road as far as you've been, what's advice you would give to that middle school or elementary school or even high school Jason? You can try to do both of those. We got 2 minutes.
Okay. That I would give my younger self is advice I would give to anybody. And that is, weather the storm, you're okay. It's going to be okay. And I know that sounds kind of general and it's not probably the advice that you were looking for, but I would definitely tell, there were a lot of situations where something didn't go my way, whether it was in music, whether it was academically, whether it was professionally, and I thought it was the end of the world. And I think that I made things harder on myself than I should have. And one of the things that I know is, like, what I'm doing with my television show that hopefully will come out in a couple of months, with Life and Justice, I may put it out there, it may not be well received or only gets 100 views on YouTube or whatever. I have to understand that that's not a failure and that I always bounce back with something different. I was just up for, I think it's fair to probably say this. I mean, it's not definite yet, but I was up for a really cool job commentating with the Lincoln Project. And I was really excited about it. I was praying hard, for this job. And it's not certain, but I'm pretty sure I didn't get it, even though I did a couple of interviews and I thought the interviews went really well. But now I could, be like, oh man, now it's over. Because I know Fox isn't going to hire me now, which I don't care. I don't want to work for Fox or for any of those right-wing networks. With the way that our society has gone now and what we're seeing recently, I want no parts of that. But, I thought it would have been interesting to have this gig, and it doesn't look like that's going to happen. But, I always bounce back with something new. So I would just be like, don't take everything so personally. Everything's going to be okay. Keep working on your craft. That's the important thing. Just always work on your craft, Stay focused and don't, sit there and think about every little thing that didn't go your way. And then you're going to miss a lot of your blessings. And right now I feel so blessed to be up here. One of the things and the platforms that I've always had over the last 20 some odd years, since 2002, has been Words Beats in Life. And it's always been it's been such a blessing that I now appreciate a whole lot more than when we were first starting out. I appreciate what Words Beats in Life has done, not only for the community, but for me personally and my own personal development. So shout out to all of you who are watching, who work with Words Beats in Life. You guys are part of a really important and big legacy. And, I was part of that legacy. And so don't screw it up. I'm kidding. But keep up the good work and keep up this beautiful, incredible name that was built and created in DC and for the DC community and for the old DC and now moving into the new DC. You guys are now a staple of hip hop in Washington, DC. It's a name that people will always attach to hip hop in Washington, DC. You're stepping into big shoes here, and Mozzie expects a lot, and he should, because that's where the brand has gone. And I'll say this: it's been such a help to me, in my creativity and my opportunities. When I'm looking for some way to partner with something, I always come to Mozzie because of what he's been able to do with Words Beats in Life. So salute.
No doubt. The feeling is mutual, good brother. Your legacy in this work, beyond Words Beats in Life, is well known and respected, and so I'm honored to have spent this hour with you. I actually really did learn a lot, which I feel so terrible because you're one of my best friends. And I feel like I didn't know a lot of that stuff, so I really appreciate you really going into great detail and helping us all see the journey that you are on, that is a continuation of the legacy of your ancestors and your family. I want to thank you for spending this time with us and look forward to you getting more projects greenlit. Looking forward to being one of the people typing in comments on the show. And so thank you so much for joining us, Jason.
Thank you.
All right, everybody. Thanks so much for tuning in. That was Dr. Jason Nichols. If you enjoyed this conversation, which I hope you did, share it. It's archived on Facebook, archived on YouTube. And yeah, this has been an honor and a privilege to be able to bring in such great speakers who are doing really important work. So follow Jason on all the socials. You can find him. For now, check out these commercials. All right? Peace.
Amen to that dream, that early morning conversation, the argument that birthed the idea, that unbelievable situation, the story that had to be told somehow. To the SP 1200, the blue light bulb, to the board, the engineer's hands, and the limited well of patience. Hallelujah to everybody say ho, amen to all the ladies say ow. Thank God for make money, money, make money, money, and bless every hand that was ever put in the air. In your name we pray. Let's take you on a time jump, virtual Zoom, bringing it back to Theodore's bedroom. These hands are passionately polysyllabic, putting the Jeopardy theme on swings. 10 dons giving predictions, balancing vibes like the sons and daughters of Ipwan. Ear to the underground, flicking off peppermint, fresh experiment. Let's go. El Premier Elemento, you gotta take your time, press your fingers to the line. Red man, focus your mind. And once you do that, you're at the front of the combine.